Oh, you're still 5 minutes early.
My name is Bruce. I'll be your pilot on this starship today to Neverland. A couple things about the coach. There is a emergency exit toward the rear on the ceiling. Also on the windows, identified by the red handle. Pull the red handle down, push the window out you go. There's a restroom in the rear for those that need to rest. There's also AC outlets on one side or the other, probably the left side, all the way down. The bus does not have Wi-Fi, so that's out of the question. Sit back, relax, and we should be there very, very shortly. It's only about 18 miles, I guess. And
thanks for coming today. We're going to do a lot of our presentations on the bus, and then when we take you off the bus, we can have some discussion time and questions and show you the practices. I'm going to start out by just kind of telling you what today is going to look like. So you are on a watershed tour to look at urban and agricultural water quality practices. And right now we are heading out to Iowa County to the Moss Farm. We'll go through some different presentations on the way there, talking about research that's being done on the farm, what practices they're using, and after that spot we'll hit up Kent Park. We'll have lunch. That will be our designated restroom break if anyone needs to use it. And then we'll head back into Coralville and we'll look at the Coral Ridge Avenue project and take a look at some bioretention cells, swales, and talk about the research that's being done there. At any time, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Some of the partners here today are the City of Coralville, the University of Iowa, the Hygienics Lab, and the tour today is being sponsored by the Watershed Improvement Review Board. So I'm not sure how many of you know about WIRB, but WIRB is the Watershed Improvement Review Board. And they helped us finance the Coral Ridge Avenue project, and they're helping us finance this tour today as well. Lunch is provided by HR Green, so thanks for picking that up, HR Green. And so WIRB, and I can't speak too much to it, but WIRB was a really great funding source for water quality practices in Iowa. It was money that was designated by the legislator, and right now it's funded out at zero. So this is maybe one of the last WIRB projects that's gone in. We hope in future years to be able to get some more money into that pot and be able to install more water quality practices like the Coral Ridge Avenue project that you'll see today. Does anyone have any questions as we start out our tour? Okay, well, let me know if you do and we'll get them answered for you. I'm going to take a look at our itinerary and see who we have up first to speak. Katie, if you want to come up here.
Okay, my name is Katie. I'd like to thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure having you and going on this tour with everybody. A little bit about myself. I'm a first-year graduate student, just finished my first year as a master's student, which feels great, at the University of Iowa. I'm in the Department of Earth and Environmental Science. Art Bettis is my advisor, and we're working together on the Critical Zone Observatory project. Can everybody hear me okay? We're good? Okay, cool. Just checking. So I'm going to explain to you a little bit about the CZO and go through what that means and hopefully answer any questions if you guys have. Okay, so the critical zone. What is the critical zone? It's essentially the skin of the Earth. It's where most of the life on planet Earth is grown, and it involves many different things such as geology, biology, climate, hydrology. So it's an interdisciplinary endeavor that involves many different things concerning our climate and how biology lives on this planet Earth. It's an NSF, a National Science Foundation funded project, and it's aimed at investigating the climate of many different landscapes across the nation. There's 11 different sites across the nation, all the way down to Puerto Rico, to the Shale Hills over in Pennsylvania, to California, and all the way here in Iowa. The one here in Iowa is the Intensively Managed Landscape Critical Zone Observatory. And what that means is that most of the landscape here is managed by agricultural practices. It's one of the most modified landscapes actually in the nation. Even though we don't see a lot of skyscrapers and things like that, agricultural endeavors is a form of management. So the IML CZO involves 3 different sites. There's one at Illinois State, which is the Upper Sangamon Basin. The one here is the Clear Creek Watershed site, and the third one is the Minnesota River Basin. So what are we trying to do here? We're trying to answer 4 main research questions. One, how has the geologic, climatic, and vegetation history molded the forms and processes of the modern landscape? How is vegetation and soil and processes taking place in the soil and underlying deposits? How is it affected by human use? How have human activities altered the movement of water, nutrients, and sediment across the land surface, in streams, and in the shallow subsurface? And how might these changes affect the long-term behavior of this landscape? Can we predict what's going to happen with the future of our landscape? Can we modify our practices based on what we see in response to those practices? So the Clear Creek study aims to address the Intensively Managed Landscape Critical Zone Observatory core research questions through a series of observations, field and laboratory experiences, and modeling. We've been doing a lot of field research these past couple weeks. You can see I got this great farmer's tan going, which we've been outside a lot and the weather's been great for us. And it's been great to get out and get a lot of monitoring equipment up so we can try to understand what's going on with our landscape. So some of the key findings to date with the Clear Creek Watershed. This is the beginning of the 3rd year of the project. Number 1, most sediment delivered to the Iowa River from the Clear Creek is derived from slope erosion rather than from bed and bank erosion. And what this means is that the slopes are the most vulnerable spot on the landscape. When water hits the slopes, it's more likely to have sediment runoff from the slopes rather than at any other spot on the landform. 2, tillage practices have significant effects on the movement of sediment and carbon on the slopes. These are essential inputs for improving soil erosion and carbon budget models. So we're trying to quantify and estimate how much soil is being eroded and what the carbon budget is looking like for this area. As rainfall percolates rapidly below the soil profile along fracture networks following moderate to heavy rainfall events. So this is something that my research is focusing a little bit about, so you can ask me any questions about it and hopefully I can answer them thoughtfully. But water is going to preferentially flow through fracture networks in the landscape, in the soil profile. So fractures develop in many different ways and water is going to flow more rapidly through them. And if we can understand the fracture networks, we can understand what kind of solutes and what kind of water is getting into the shallow groundwater. And lastly, the pre-1850 floodplain surface is buried beneath about 2 to 4 feet of historic sediment in many parts of the Clear Creek watershed. The high carbon content buried soil may have potential as a natural bioreactor for reducing nitrate loads. So what this means is that since people have settled Iowa, erosion that has come off of the hill slopes has been deposited in the basins. And as it's being deposited, it's about, an estimated 2 to 4 feet in some areas, and beneath it is a really organic, rich soil profile. So as water is getting down into that organic, rich area, it can potentially reduce the nitrate loads by denitrification. So that's all I have for you right now. If you have any questions, I can try to answer them. Yeah.
Katie, when you're talking about that critical zone, the skin,
Yeah.
from what to what does that encompass? Like, are we talking trees to ground, or where is that area?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thanks for asking that. So that includes the upper atmosphere down to, up to 10 to 20 meters below the surface, but the majority of it is right at the surface. But of course, everything plays into one another. The atmosphere, the soil, the water, everything relates to one another. You can't take one without the other, and that's the idea of this critical zone observatory, is that it's an interdisciplinary approach to get everybody working together to have the best understanding. Yeah.
How did you determine that the erosion sediment being delivered to the river
From the slopes? He asked, how did we determine that the sediment being delivered to the Iowa River is coming from the slopes? That might be a question for Art Bettis. That's not really my specialty. I appreciate that question though, and it's a really good question. How do you know exactly where it's coming from? Landform features might be the best. You might have an idea.
I don't know a whole lot about this subject. Art is definitely the expert on this, but I believe there was a lot of research done in the Clear Creek Watershed involving radioactive isotopes and putting them into the banks, into the hillsides, and then actually tracing where those sediment loads were coming from. And they found a majority of them was coming from much more gully erosion via slopes and hillsides versus sheer bank erosion moving down the stream corridor.
Yeah, I know there was a grad student before me who was doing a post-settlement alluvium project, and they used the isotope like cesium-137, which you can use to date the age of that sediment washing down. So that might be related to that.
I have a very general question
Yeah.
about watersheds. So, the erosion from watersheds, is it more than the bank erosions from the river? Is that right? Or how is that watersheds is a more critical area as compared to rivers or like other water bodies?
Sure. Yeah, the watershed erosion issue is that it's a larger, more encompassing issue. You're trying to. I think the Clear Creek watershed is about 250 square kilometers, so you're looking at a larger erosion site, but the bank erosion certainly is an issue. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
And one of the things historically that we've looked at within the Clear Creek watershed has been the sediment loads coming off the landscape into Clear Creek. And we have a predominantly agricultural landscape out here, and there has been a lot of calculations done to determine what these sub-watersheds, how many tons of sediment a year is getting contributed to the creek. But also another thing that we watch very closely is the sediment loads coming off of construction sites in town. So an area in town, a construction site that doesn't have adequate controls, produces 9 times more of a heavier sediment load than an agricultural field, just based on the fact that vegetation isn't present. So we have much more agricultural landscape, thus the ability to produce a high sediment load. But also in town, we can have a pretty bad situation if a construction site doesn't have adequate sediment controls in place.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point. And like I said, most of Iowa's landscape is dominated by agricultural activity. But when you get into urban areas and you're doing a lot of construction, you can have severe erosion problems. So both are really good to think about. Yeah, I don't know if we can. Yeah.
I can hold this and
Okay.
walk back.
Yeah. Sorry, I can't hear you. What's the question?
Have you looked at how much the different soil types have affected erosion?
The erosion
Whether
properties?
Clay, silt, or loam?
Yeah. I haven't personally. I'll go up to the microphone and speak. So the question was, have we looked at different soils of the area and their properties and how that would affect erosion rates? What I know about the soils of this area, there's a bunch of different soils in this area, but it's dominated by the Tama series, which is the state soil of Iowa actually, and it's a mollisol, and it's very rich in organic material. I believe it's a silty clay loam. And it's actually the most productive soil in the United States, I believe, which is really interesting. But I'm not sure about how that affects the erosion properties. It's not very clay dominated, not as much as you would see in the Des Moines area, in the Des Moines Lobe area. So I can't speak in particular about how that affects the erosion rates, but good question.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your tile project?
Sure, yeah, you want me to do that now? Yeah. Okay, so another little project we have going on in the Clear Creek Watershed is a tile monitoring project, and it's set up at Trimpey Farm, which is close to the Moss Farm, just downslope of Moss Farm. And what we're doing is monitoring nitrate loads as well as the flow that's coming out of these tiles. One thing in particular, they're very usual tile lines. They're not anything special, but we're just looking at the nitrate loads that are coming directly from the subsurface and also the deep subsurface, and how much volume you're getting throughout the year, as well as the nitrate levels differing throughout the year. So that's essentially what we have going on there. We've got I believe it's two or three tile lines being monitored, and it's coming directly from a soybean field right now. And we do these things called ISCO samplers, which is where you can set it up to sample, daily or hourly, however you want to monitor it. Let's say you get a storm, and you want to do an hourly sample and see how it's changing throughout the hour. So that's what we're doing.
I have this basic understanding that in agricultural practices, there's a greater use of something called pattern tiling now, where it's not as deep and it's more extensive and it moves water more quickly off of a field.
Okay.
Can you speak at all to whether that is good or bad from a stormwater or an erosion perspective?
Yeah. The question was about pattern tiling, and if pattern tiling is better for agricultural runoff. I don't know very much about tiles and how they work and how they're installed, so I can't say for sure. So
I'll speak to that a little
there
bit.
we go.
So, I think maybe historically, when land was farmed and there was a wet area, you might run one tile through that area to dry that spot. And what Tony's talking about with pattern tiling is blanketing a field with a lot of tile running in all directions to ensure drainage of that entire field. And I think urban and ag, anytime you put in a drain and take water artificially to a stream via a pipe, it's bad for water quality. So whether you're doing that in a farm field with tiling or if you're doing that in a city with storm drains, it has the same consequences, just different pollutant loads. And one thing I think that's very interesting about Art's study is that, so he's looking at two different tiles, and for people that don't understand or don't know very much about agricultural tiling, there could be a few different scenarios here. So one is subsurface drainage, and that's a perforated pipe under the ground, draining water, like under the soil. Another type of tiling would be surface tiling. So this would be like a beehive, or they call it a Hickenbottom, on top of the ground that would only take water that was pooling on top of the ground. So we have two different tiling systems, and they're monitoring both. And Art will talk a little bit more about what his results are and what he's seeing later, but I think there's dramatic differences between the nitrate load between the subsurface tiling, the perforated and the surface tiling where there's just an overflow taking ponded water. So I think he's getting some really interesting data coming out of that.
Yeah. Is that bad for the water quality as well?
Her question was, is the surface tiling also bad for water quality? You know, I think anytime that you take water to a creek in a pipe, it's going to have a negative effect on water quality. Historically, you know, if we talk about the historic water cycle, surface water should be infiltrating. It should be getting to creeks, rivers, and streams via groundwater flow. And anytime you short circuit that cycle, I think there's negative effects. But Art will be able to talk a little bit more specifically about the results he's seeing on the agricultural sites, and also on our urban site when we go into town. And we're getting pretty close. We're just a few minutes away. So when we get to the site, we'll all meet up, and the landowner is going to be there. He doesn't want to talk too much, but he's going to just, you know, say a few sentences about his farm. And one reason this site is great is because this could be any farm in Iowa. This is, you know, it's a family-owned but pretty industrial row crop farm, and the practices that he's implementing here could be done anywhere. Wow, it always scares me a little bit driving on gravel. I think this guy's got it though. So we'll get out. He'll talk. The farmer will talk a little bit, and then Art will talk about and you'll hear him talk about the CZO. That's the Critical Zone Observatory. The same thing that is talked about in your pamphlets. He'll talk a little bit about what they're doing on this specific farm to forward the research for that project. We'll walk around, and we really won't be here that long. We'll probably be here from when we step off the bus to when we get back on, an hour, maybe a little less. And then we'll head back down the road, and we'll hit that tile monitoring location on the way out so everyone can see that. And Art will talk briefly there, and then we'll head on to lunch. And you are at the Moss Family Farm. Stuart's going to talk for just a second about the farm, and Art is going to talk about the research that he's working on here.
First of all, thank you for all coming here. I think this is kind of more of a typical one. We don't have a show place here, as you can see here, but we're proud of what we have. We've been farming here. My great-grandfather was the original one, and then my grandfather and my dad, and passed on to me, or bought it from him. And my son here, Jared, and his wife, Abby, just moved here. They moved us off about 2 years ago, and we did the same thing to my dad, and we wanted to put a trailer house here next to it, and he said, we'll just get off of here. And so we moved here, so we did about the same time. And my other youngest son here, Connor, I don't know, we're going to fit him in here also. And so anyway, we're welcome to our place here. This is like a 240 acre farm here, what we own here. We rent some other surrounding farms around here also that we do here. We started working with FSA quite a while. Dad started a long time ago with strip farming, probably in the 70s, and he was pretty much, we don't do a lot of cover crops here yet, but we try to do what we can to make it profitable. So, and we just kind of kept going. We put some terraces in here and started working with a NRCS here with some terracing about 6-7 years ago, and that's how it got started. Then the university and Art and some of the other guys started doing some other testing here, which is really interesting. I wish I could remember a lot of this stuff, what they do, but he's going to explain all that. Yeah, okay. Anyway, I just it's really a pleasure working with everybody. They're really courteous people to work with, and I have nothing else to say. They've got quite a few here from the NRCS board here from Iowa County here too. I'm an associate member, but the other guys are the big cheeses here. But anyway, is that good enough here? So anyway,
we're at one of the our observatories for the critical zone observatory. We have a bunch of wells and stuff up here. And actually, let's just go out and walk up to the hay bale trucks and get things going here. And I can just sort of talk as we're going out into the field, because we got the mic, right? Amy, wherever you are. Yeah. So we'll just make use of our time, because this is a tight one here. We got to ride out there and get to the site. So you'll notice when you're getting on the trucks, there's a bunch of wells and stuff. You'll see they're little yellow towers and a whole bunch of things spinning around and things like that. They're basically just groundwater wells. They're fairly shallow wells. Those are the ones we know we've got this really fast infiltration from this land surface that I talked about. And we also have a weather station there, and we have soil moisture and temperature monitoring to about 60 centimeters depth there. We've also got pore water sampling going on there, and we're in the process of installing some gravity lysimeters, which will let us collect water that passes through the soil and into the groundwater. So basically we're trying to grab all the water at various levels and see what happens to the water, both in terms of quantity and chemistry as it passes through the soil profile, and then finally gets into a zone where it's not interacting with the soil as much and starts to pass its way down into the groundwater. We're also doing a lot of microbial work here, because microbes make everything happen. We know nothing about them. But all the processes that are taking place that involve any kind of transformation of anything are probably related to microbial processes. And so we've got a group at Northwestern University that's working on that at this site here too. So let's hop on and get going. Anybody who wants to walk, follow me. It's about a quarter of a mile. I'll get going. It's not working? Yeah. Okay, I can yell. These are our wells here. This one's collecting water from 65 feet. This one's collecting water from 35 feet. And this one's collecting water from 21 feet. And these little boxes here have a bunch of bottles in them, okay? And there's a tube that goes down into the well, and that sampler gets tripped off by a device in here. When water table rises a foot in this well, it trips off the sampler, and we start sampling every whatever interval we want to sample at over a couple days time, and we collect the water out of the well at that point. So that's allowing us to sort of see how the chemistry of the water is changing with time from this infiltration event. These are our pore water samplers. These are at about this deep, about that deep, about that deep, and about that deep. And we're able to actually extract water from the soil with those and see the chemistry of the water. And then the rest of this is just soil moisture and temperature and weather station. So we know basically when it rains, how much it rains, the rate at which it rains. And we also are able to calculate evapotranspiration, because we have a solar irradiance, we have wind speed and direction, that sort of stuff. So we're able to come up with a water balance here, which is a really important thing for understanding what's going on, because as the season changes, the water balance, the ET, changes a lot, and the interaction of the vegetation with the water that's infiltrating changes a whole lot. So we set this one up here. It's in a little grassed area, but most of the water we're collecting is related to the row crop fields around it, especially in the wells. So we're getting a good picture of what's going on underneath a row crop area. Let's go. Okay, this stop we're going to look at these alternative tile intakes, or ATIs. The third sheet of your handout has an information sheet on the ATIs, and this is excuse me, research that was sponsored by IDALS, Iowa Department of Ag and Land Stewardship, and James Martin, who some of you probably know, was involved in this, and then Dr. Thanos Papanikolau was the main science lead. I just sort of know about it because I've been here, okay? So anyhow, the idea here is that we have these little check dams, these little terraces that we put on the landscape in order to do several things. Shorten slope for one thing, okay, because the shorter slope, the water has less of a chance to get rolling down the hill and cause problems. And then also during fairly large rains, these little check dams catch water in behind them and store that water temporarily. And the idea typically with the terrace is you have a standpipe like that there that's perforated that goes down into a tile system and takes the water away, so that you get some infiltration, but you don't want to not let water have a way out, because if it rains a lot, your investment goes down the road pretty quickly when the water runs over the top of the terrace. So the idea is to let as much water as you can infiltrate, but to protect yourself against having too much water and blowing your terrace out. Well, this idea of alternative tile intake is that let's take advantage of this ponded water here. Okay, the water's ponds, it catches some of the sediment that's in the water, and eventually you have to go in here and clear these out because they fill in with sediment. Well, that sediment has nutrients with it, phosphorus especially, okay? And like I say, phosphorus is a tough one. It doesn't transform very readily, okay? Once it gets into the system and gets in suspended sediment and gets in the water, it just moves through the system, okay? So the idea behind the ATIs is to actually put in a system that allows that water to infiltrate, and not only infiltrate, but to filter out some of that sediment, and then also to put a bioreactor in that system so that you can actually transform some of the nitrate. Because if the nitrate is in an oxidized state, it's in contact with the atmosphere, remains as nitrate, not good for the environment. If you can get it in a situation where there's a lot of organic matter and where oxygen gets depleted, you transform that and you turn it into atmospheric nitrogen or some other form of nitrogen that is not a problem. And so these are you probably all heard of bioreactors that people are building along floodplains and stuff like that. Well, this is a little mini bioreactor system here that's high up on the landscape. So it keeps the nitrate and the phosphorus up on the field before it gets into the tile system, before we end up with the problem. So let's walk out here. We're gonna walk out. We'll look at one that's just on the other side here because we can see it a little better. And then we'll also see there's your last sheet there, you got sort of a Google image of the farm. There's a constructed wetland at the end of this drainage way too. That we'll talk about what it does when we get out here. So off in the distance there, this side of the creek, see those, there's a little area that's got some willows and grasses and it's not crops. That's constructed wetland, okay? And Stuart was telling me how this place was so wet all the time that they weren't getting much crop off it anyway. It was more hassle than it was worth, okay?
That drains, you can kind of see it, it goes up. I know I was going to count up the acres when it drains. If it's 500 acres here, where that grass starts, it just goes up in that valley there and all the way to the far tree. It just, on the rain events, it just keeps washed through. It's actually real good soil. The contractor, one of the guys that actually did the work, thought we were nuts doing it. I mean, it's ground, but we just had trouble with erosion. It just keep going. So it's actually a rented farm from a cousin, and he allowed us to do that. And so we just took off about 5 acres there, and then he was like, there's like 3 little ponds down there that sometimes they have water and sometimes not. And we cut all the tiles underneath it and put solid tiles where the main drainage goes through there, and it's been working out really well for us here.
How long has that been there?
It's been 5 years, I think.
And no, there's been no monitoring to it, okay? So it should be doing a really good job.
Yeah.
I mean, put it this way, just slowing the water down helps a lot, okay? And putting it into an environment where there's not as much oxygen and there's a bunch of organic matter. The other benefit there, that's great habitat.
Oh, yeah.
It's terrific habitat. And you look out here and habitat's pretty, little strips here and there, a little strip along the creek, but that's a really nice piece of habitat down there that when you go down there, in midsummer and late summer, it's just full of butterflies and birds and all kinds of stuff down there. So it's a really good use where you weren't making much money off it.
No.
Helps the environment a whole lot in many ways to do that, and so it's an all-around good
Now, is
situation.
that where the bioreactors output then? Where do these bioreactors dump into? Creek?
They go into there, yep. So they're basically taking, theoretically, some of the phosphorus out of the water that's ending up down there, and probably some of the nitrate too. So that's going to help that wetland too a whole lot, because you're not going to have all the eutrophication that you would normally get if you were just dumping straight tile line discharge into it. What'd you seed that as down there?
Or I just didn't hear.
Did you seed it? What kind of seed?
It's just just a little bit of grass and switchgrass. We tried to figure out, and we've used switchgrass. We have about 2 miles here where we farm here. We put switchgrass along the creeks there, 60-foot border, and we just use the same mix there. Yeah.
That's one thing we've been noticing too, and this makes sense to me anyway, is, you know, ideally you'd plant prairie along these buffers, but guess what? There's this thing called reed canary grass that just comes in there and takes over. So you might as well just put an aggressive grass in there and go with it, and try to keep something that's going to be a buffer that's going to keep the reed canary grass out. Because you know, you burn it, it loves it. Reed canary grass loves to be burned.
We didn't burn it this year, but there was just so many ducks down there this year, so we burned the rest of the creek, but we kind of backfire. We left that there. I just didn't. But usually we burn it off, like you said. It just seemed like it grows back so much better.
Yeah. So let's go down to this ATI over here. Yeah.
Right here too.
Okay, so this is an ATI, and on the back side of that ATI handout, there's a picture of construction. Okay, and so it's basically, there's a trench that runs off this direction. It has a perforated tile underneath it.
Right, yeah, it's just that when you first put them in, we put the actual inlet. You could see all the holes in there, and that's where normally would have just, you know, surface water would run right into it. If you look at it now, there's a kind of another PVC pipe in there that it's just a bathtub cork, so it plugs it up, and we put a T in there and run a vertical, horizontal, I guess, tube over to about, there's like a 6 or 8 foot square by 4 foot on this side of it here. We dug down, lined it with plastic, and then put, I think there's like 3 feet or 4 feet of wood chips in there, and then you can come down and look, and then on top we put the rock here on that T-rock where it filters down, and then there's perforated tile that'll, when the water runs through it, it'll filter through that, and it'll seep into that regular tile line as it is. And if it for some reason if it gets too high, it can overflow into it. We don't want anything to wash over top of the terrace, and it'll take out the terrace. But we've never had an issue. I mean, it's been taking it just as quick as the inlet when we did have a rain events. First couple of years when they were doing the actual tests, we never had any rain. It just never. And so when the testing that they did, didn't show a lot. They did some, but we never had a lot of heavy rains. But I didn't do anything for maintenance here. It just is kind of the way it is. So, and I mean, it's been working really well here so far.
Yeah, the pea gravel is the sediment filter, and then the chips are basically the bioreactor part of the system. And there's some a master's student did some research on this for Dr. Papanaklau, and what is it? This design should take about 75 4+ inch rains before it needs to be cleaned out.
And what do you mean cleaned out? You have to
Well, you basically end up with the sediment. You'll plug up the gravel.
Okay.
So you just come in here with a backhoe and put some chips in there and put some more pea gravel on top. Just you would with a regular.
Well, probably I won't know that how long it is till
it starts looking like a regular thing again. Yep.
What do you do with the material that's in there? How do you dispose? I mean, do you spread it on the landscape?
I suppose.
Dump it up on the terrace. Yeah. It's just wood chips and pea gravel.
Chips should be almost compost.
Yeah, you can see up there at that pile. If you dig down in the pile there, they compost pretty readily. Yep.
Did you do the work yourself, or did you contract?
We had the guy, the engineer, or the construction guy that actually did our tiling, installed it for us here.
Yeah,
Reinhardt tiling.
They weren't that expensive either, were they?
No, it wasn't.
About $500.
Much more cost effective than putting in a big bioreactor if you have a
creek, a small one.
Well, I know there's some places where they've done it. We haven't done that yet.
Yeah, here you're able to treat it up high, and with a big one you need to go farther down. So I think, yeah, that'd be an interesting thing to look at to see what's more cost effective.
To me, if one fails, if your large one fails,
You're out of luck.
you're out of luck.
Yep.
You gotta,
Yeah, this is sort of a resilience thing here. Yep.
to me, it's gonna be like when Tom puts these in, right?
Yep.
Yeah, this isn't that hard to install. I mean, it takes a little more time, but it's, and like I say, the dollars to do it isn't that. But like I say, it takes a little time. But you're right. I mean, if you have one large one and you're always putting in different tiles, well, if you miss it here, you're kind of getting it at the source here.
Okay, Amy says we got to get back. So we can just kind of walk right along here. We don't need to go back up the top of the hill if you don't want to. So this is the middle fork of Clear Creek. Joins main Clear Creek downstream a little bit. This is where we're monitoring tile lines. You can see a tile line coming in down here. If you look close down the creek, there's a white solid PVC pipe coming in. That line has surface inlets up here. So basically these are not ATIs, these are your standard terraces with the standpipe that water pours into instead of going over the top. So that has a surface inlet. That one has lower nitrate content, but it has sediment coming out of it, okay? Upstream about 200-300 feet, there's another tile line that has no surface inlets that we're monitoring there. That one has a lot higher nitrate content, okay? So this field's not excessively tiled, I wouldn't say. I think it's sort of an average tile situation here. There's a few up this way, up in this, but it's not pattern tiled by any means. So it's pretty typical kind of situation that we're getting through most of Clear Creek here. One of the bullet points was that there's this buried pre-1850 surface. About 3 feet below the surface of this floodplain out here, there's a buried soil that has 2 to 3% organic matter in it for about 4 feet depth, okay? It's bypassed by the tiles. The tiles run across the top of it or run through it, but they are collecting water for it, not letting the water sit in it. With some sort of alternative tile management, water management system, you can maybe take advantage of that as a bioreactor. We don't know for sure. Basically, seasonally controlling the flow out of the tile. Basically, getting the water off when you want to get it off, when you got a plant, but later on during the year, during the summer, if you've got excess water, you can see they're still running, slow it down, slow the discharge, actually let your plants get their roots down in that water and actually keep the water back in there a little bit and do some denitrification. It's just an idea, would cost money, but it's probably something that could be done, an alternative to the big bioreactor kind of things that they're doing now in floodplains, where they're digging a big trench and filling them full of chips or organic matter. Those have issues too, especially these creeks flood. May 5 last year, there was 1.5 feet of water out here running like crazy across this road. So these things flood, and those bioreactors don't like it when that happens. That's not good for them at all, okay? So I guess that's all we got to say here. This is a sort of pretty typical flow in this creek right now, this time of year, whatever typical is. It'll slow down as the season goes on. Right now, the nitrate content of the water is not too high at all, and actually there's not a lot of chlorophyll in here right now either, so it doesn't have the algal blooms. Later in the summer, when the flow slows down, this thing will get green, and there's good stuff living in here. I've seen, I don't know if you're doing it, but guys come down here and get chubs all the time for going fishing and stuff. So there's buffalo come up here. Yep. So yeah, there's a lot of wildlife in these little strips along here. Lots and lots of stuff going on.
That's the fish bump.
Yep. not the big furry ones, just the buffalo, huh? Yeah. Right now, coming out of that tile line, it's probably, well, we sampled it last week, somewhere in the 20 milligrams per liter. Higher down below. Yeah, the one down below we have a nitrax sampler that we use for in-lab testing, and we had to dilute in order, because our nitrax tops out at 32. So we had to dilute to get the numbers. But I say that's typical. So we'll come up with some loads here, and it's not that these guys are putting on more than they need, you know. And the other thing is, it's in beans this year. There was no nitrogen put on this field. This is from corn last year, so it's coming out. There's a legacy of nutrient additions that are going on here too. So it's really hard to deal with nutrients as far as monitoring goes, because it's such a long-term endeavor to really get a picture of what's really going on, because there's a lot of climatic influences on what ends up being stored in the soil, what passes out of the soil into the stream system.
So, do you have any crop histories on this? I mean, how many years has it been in the rotational cross corn soybeans rather than being in oats, alfalfa?
Yeah. Joe, you have any idea about that? How long has this been in row crop?
Max, how long has it been in row crop? Probably 100 years.
100 years.
We have a longer rotation.
Were you growing oats or anything out here at one time, or?
Not in my life.
Not much, mostly corn and.
Yeah, we had cattle, we had a longer rotation.
Yep. So, yeah. And I think that's pretty typical in this upper watershed. These are great soils. I mean, they're. yeah.
All right.
Let's go.
Yeah.
That's where you got your beautiful.
We're going to talk a little bit about Kent Park restoration, lake restoration, and some of the water quality issues we're dealing with here. My name's Brad Friedoff. I'm the Conservation Program Manager for the department. I don't directly do all the testing and all this stuff that's going on out here, but I'm going to try to give you guys a really fast conversion or a summary of all the stuff that we have going on here. So this all started when the Conservation Board, and several of the Conservation Board members are in the audience today, so if you see one of them, grab them. Raise your hand if you're a Conservation Board member. Alice in the back, Bill, Larry. We decided we needed a strategic plan to guide where our conservation department was going in the future. So we spent a lot of time with our Board of Supervisors, and we have several Board of Supervisors here, local community leaders, people that were involved with conservation to help us get an idea of what do we need to be doing. And that all ended up in this strategic plan. And on that, we had 6 top priorities that came out of that: to protect natural resources, restore natural resources, connect people to our natural resources, improve water quality, develop really good partnerships, and be sustainable. Okay? And so water quality is one of those really high issues that constantly came up over and over and over. So any project we do, water quality is one of the things we think of. When I'm out there looking at buying land to build a trail, how are we impacting water quality with our trail? When we're looking at taking down trees or planting prairies or putting in a campsite, all those things, we always evaluate how are we impacting water quality, improving it, being negative on it, or neutral, okay? And hopefully every time we do a project, we hope to be making an improvement on water quality. So one of the things that we knew we had a problem with here was the water quality within Kent Park, and this is only one of our multiple areas that we take care of. Now this is an 84 slide show. I'm not going to show all of those to you, and if you do, you're going to blink and it's going to go by you. But a little bit about this. So Kent Park's been around for a long time. We purchased the first land for this area in 1966, and we have one of our adjoining landowners here. She could probably tell you a lot of the history that even I don't know about Kent Park. But it's been developed over years. It started out with this little parcel here. You can see there's not even a lake on that landscape. One thing I want you to take away from that picture is notice what the land cover looks like. Is it all covered with trees? No, it's probably mostly pasture ground and maybe some ag ground. There's some valleys that are covered with trees, but primarily it's open area. We developed a master plan, began constructing the dam. Go to high quality pictures there of what the dam looked like. You can see the row crops in the background, which is now an area that's been converted into tall grass prairie. We completed the dam. We officially opened in the 1970s. We continued to purchase additional land to expand the lake. And finally, you see this 1972 lake level set. Well, we had officially opened it in 1970. We decided after the fact that, it's not quite as big as we want it. Let's add a few more feet to it. And so 1972 was the official level, and that is what we're operating at today. Now again, take another picture of that park. Today, if you go down there, what are you going to see that's totally different? You're going to see a lot more trees. I'll continue to talk about that as we go through this. Land purchase for runoff, beach. You can tell there's a lot more people out there. Again, look at that. Why was there a lot more people? Water quality is a lot better. If we go down there today, we're still going to have a lot of people, but some days, sadly, we have to close our beach. The beach and marina area, or boat ramp area, were finished, and the fisherman's parking lot was finished. We did have to do some dredging. So back in the late 90s, we had some problems with this lake. And at that point, we had to go back in and we had to do some dredging. This is one of the dredge spoil areas that we have. Currently, that area is covered in willows and grasses, but it probably, as we go through this restoration process, it may go back to looking like this for a short period of time while we do some lake restoration. There's our dredging operation. So we did a hydraulic dredge. The restoration process we're working through right now at the lake may contain some of this. Everybody always asks me, are you guys going to for sure dredge it? We don't absolutely know 100% what we're going to be doing. Our conservation board will evaluate what our consultants come back and tell us, but that is a component we want to put in there. There's no reason to go in and do only something part way, okay? If I go in there to have some surgery done, cosmetic surgery, to make me look better, I want to make sure he does it all, make sure it's all good, right? I don't want to go in there and just get it partially done so you look better, but you're still not very good looking. I want to make sure it's done right. And so if we're going to go in and do all this stuff in the watershed, we want to make sure the lake is fixed as well. Okay, so in 2012, we're getting more into our current times now here. Kate and Jeremy, where is Kate in here? What was Jeremy's name? You'd know too. Craig?
Jeremy Brill?
Brill did, yes. He helped us complete our gully assessment out here at Kent Park. He was with the Soil and Water Conservation District at that time. And then we started from that gully assessment, we learned a lot, but we said, okay, we still have unknown answers. So we started doing some water quality monitoring in 2014. We completed our assessment in 2014, and we continue to do water quality assessments, and citizens really told us, hey, that's an important thing. And so we expanded that even beyond Kent Park. Okay, so what are the problems, and why is it all of a sudden now? People said, Kent Park's been here for a long time. Why? What's the big deal now? We have a lot of different issues. Art's already talked about several of them, and their continual story with water quality issues. Sedimentation. We have sediments that are moving around. A lot of times, we have people that want to go and say, oh, those farmers, it's all their problem. There's sedimentation issues that we have right here in our park. When we get into the urban environment, we're going to find things that the urban environment has issues with. This is a problem that we're all in together, big time. And so we have sedimentation issues out here we need to address. We have excessive nutrient loads, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We have fecal coliform bacteria problems that can be problematic to human health. And that's only an indicator bacteria. There's probably a lot of other bacteria in there, but that's our indicator. We have blue-green algae, and they produce a toxin called microcystins that, again, is another thing that is a problem to human health. And then we have lake aesthetics. When we have these microcystins in there, the blue-green algae, if you go down to our lake and you just had a great lunch here, and you sit around the lake and it smells horrible, you're not going to stick around very long. And so we need to have a lake that's appealing to visitors. That's what this park's here, is to get people to come out and recreate and enjoy their natural resources. So the following slides, I'm going to focus on the E. coli and the cyanobacteria because those are the things that really have an impact on human health. One report I just recently read was talking about the cyanobacteria in Minnesota. And over 18 dogs have died in a 10-year period because of cyanobacteria. Now, Johnson County, people really love their pets. And so that's a big deal. If we have pets that we're putting pets in danger just by coming out to a lake and going swimming, that's something we're very concerned with. So we've been doing a lot of water quality. The Iowa Department of Natural Resources beach monitoring program, and then we've been participating in that voluntarily, and then we've also been collecting a lot of data with our own conservation staff. So the bacteria. So a lot of times people always are confused with this. Fecal coliform bacteria are a subgroup of a total coliform bacteria, and they're in the intestines of warm-blooded animals. So people always ask us, well, it's the fish. You got too many fish in the lake. Well, that's a good theory, but it's got to come from warm-blooded animals. So we're thinking livestock or humans. And so we haven't identified specifically what, but it is an issue, and we know it's in there. Okay? And the reason it's a problem, yes, there's going to be some naturally occurring in there, but it's this magic number right here, that 235 for a one-time sample or that 126 for several collections put together. I'm not going to get into all the details in it, but we monitor that. Okay? If we get over those numbers, that's when we're telling people, hey, be very cautious going into the water. Now, it's not something, you know, I grew up on a farm. I'm sure I swam in water that had higher numbers, way higher than that. But I wasn't ingesting it. I was a farm kid. I knew when to have my mouth closed in the barn, right? So that's part of the problem is there's some of these people don't know that, and they're ingesting some of that water. So we have a concern there. And you can see our tests are all over the place depending on what the weather, how much influx of water is coming from outside of the park. So sometimes we have to post swimming advisories, and you can see that concentration there. If we get over that yellow line there, that's when we're starting to get really worried, and when we want to let people know, hey, be pretty cautious when you go into that water. I'm going to fly through some different things here. Cyanobacteria, some of you may hear about this. This is the stuff that we can't even filter it out of our drinking water. It's a toxin produced by blue-green algae. And people get it in there. Pets are very susceptible to it because what do pets do when they've been in the water? They clean themselves off and they're ingesting it. We humans can have that same problem. Kids, you know, they're playing in the water, splashing around. It causes liver impairments and other issues. And that comes from the algae blooms. Those cells, as they're broken down, they release those toxins. Very problematic. And there's no way to just pick up that algae and move it somewhere else. So we're concerned with those. What are all these things through? Caused from? A lot of times, remember all those nutrients that Art was talking about getting into the systems? Those are the same things we have moving into our systems here. And remember how he said how difficult it was to tell where phosphorus was coming from? Guess what is the limiting nutrient in a lot of these aquatic systems? Phosphorus. Well, we've got a lot of phosphorus coming from somewhere into our system, and we've got to figure out how to stop it. Another issue I always get is people ask, well, you've got all these issues. Are the fish edible here? Can you still eat the fish? Yes. Don't just cook them up and eat all the internal organs. But if you're just eating the flesh, yes, they're probably safe to eat. Okay. So a lot of data collection. These are all the different agencies that have been involved in that. You know, we're just not out there taking anecdotal looks and going, yeah, this doesn't look as good as it did 5 years ago. Because maybe I'm just getting old and crotchety and I don't remember what 5 years ago was. This is real scientific data, and all these different organizations have been involved in that. So we've a lot of data behind all this. I'm not going to go through it. We have 14 sites within the park. I think we'll fly by that slide here in a minute. Bacteria loads, I'm not going to talk about that. So these are the 14 sites we sample around Kent Park. We try to do them after every 1.25 inch rainfall event and every 10 days. And so we have staff. One thing we'll be doing this summer is because I look out in this crowd and there's a lot of the choir. A lot of you guys already know the issues. I want to make sure the lay people know. So we're going to have 3 school teachers from the Cedar Rapids School District this summer working with us. And one of the things they'll be doing is helping us with the water testing. They're going over June 10th and doing eye water testing in Des Moines. And then they'll be helping us with our water sampling. But here's some of the stuff that we're out there doing. You guys have seen all this stuff. I don't want to spend all day looking at water testing. Let's see what else. But there's our big issue, okay? So we have excess phosphorus causes a big algal bloom, and then these are the issues that we deal with on top of that, which is where our problems come with the people. They just expect it to be like swimming pools, right? It's not, okay? Here's the problems we have. You can see the standard is supposed to be 235 micrograms per liter. You can see how much higher we are with the phosphorus loads in Kent Park. And our goal is to bring that down by 50 to 75% with our lake restoration program. Now, is that an achievable goal? We hope so. It's a high goal, but that's, if you're going to make an improvement, that's what you always want to shoot for, is a very high goal. We also had USGS come out here and help us with our sediments. We said, even if we stop all the phosphorus and other sediments and nutrients coming into the lake, what's already in there, okay? Because if I have clean water coming out of the shower, but my bathtub's disgusting, I'm still going to be in disgusting water, okay? So I want to make sure there's not a lot of phosphorus or other things in the sediment. And so they came out and they did a lot of studies for us, and they did find that there is phosphorus in there as well. So again, it goes back to that holistic approach. Don't just fix one thing, fix the whole problem. So here's some pictures of them doing their studies. Results, so you can see they told us what different sediments we had out there, concentrations, and some of that stuff we expected to have higher phosphorus way at the top, but then even way down at the bottom end of the lake, probably because those sediments don't get stirred up very often and they're just building up. But again, it wasn't the silver bullet. It was like, oh, there it is. So it gave us more data, but it didn't give us the silver bullet. Let's see what else. There's more core samples they did. Okay, so what are we going to do with this? Well, right now we've collected all this data, and we said, wow, that's a ton of data. The packet, if anybody wants to read it, needs something to do, 372 pages worth of data from DNR studies, USGS studies, our studies here at the park. We said, well, we think we really need to come up with somebody to evaluate all this, create some models. If we did some best management practices, how much reduction would that have for the lake and for the wetlands? So right now we've hired Stanley Consultants. They are working with Limnotech out of the cities, and they're doing some studies. They're helping us develop some best management practices to put on the park. One of them is going to be a lot more bioswales. We're going to take not only and do some things in the woodland areas, but we're also going to do some of those urban practices that we hope are demonstration style sites. So bioswales, we'll put those near some of our parking lots, like the beach parking lot. We have a huge parking lot that is maybe filled 2 or 3 weekends a year. The rest of the time of the year, it's just this really impervious surface. So we're going to put in some bioswales. We're also looking at TSI projects. If any of you have been out here before and you look right across the road, what did you see out there before in the past? Trees. We had trees everywhere, right? Well, get ready. Is everybody ready? Hold your pants on. If you've lived around Johnson County a long time, Kent Park likes to plant trees. Now the theme of Kent Park is going to be, yeah, we planted too many trees. Okay? So a lot of those trees we planted over the years, if you were a scout that came out here and planted trees, you may want to come back and volunteer as a scout to take down those trees. Because what we've done is we've taken a prairie landscape, a landscape that's probably got kind of sandy, loose soils, and we've put a shaded environment on top of that. And that doesn't work very well. So instead of infiltration, we get a lot of this runoff. There's no vegetation there to help that rain infiltrate. And so we end up with erosion. That's why we did all those gully studies. And we think that's one of our big problems. So are we going to take all the trees out? Not all the trees, but we're going to slowly work to get sites like across the road revegetated, reshaped, seeded with probably a prairie seed or savanna woodland mix, and we'll have some scattered oaks, hickories, cottonwoods, variety of different trees out there in the landscape. That hopefully will be more appealing to us, the wildlife, and help water quality at the same time. So here's, these are some of the projects that we're working on. You can see this Whippoorwill area, that 30 acres that we've worked there. So we've got a lot of spots that we can do that. And this is just Kent Park. We have areas throughout Johnson County. City of Coralville has areas. Hopefully we are going to act as an example and show this is what can happen once you thin your woodlands, once you take care of your woodlands. Just like these guys that are out there farming, that's hard work to take care of the landscape. Well, those of us in other areas, even our cities and communities, we have to do some hard work on our own land to manage them. You can't just let them take care of yourself, okay? Let's see, what is this one? Prairie seedings. These are some areas that we're going to convert to seeding. You'll even see in the park right now, if you drive around, you'll see areas and you'll say, gosh, those county guys are getting really lazy. They forgot to mow that area. We're slowly letting those go back. I'm getting the 5-minute button, so I'll keep talking. See, look at that, Kate. See, right on the nose. So, I was talking really fast there so I could get a lot of stuff in, but I wanted to make you guys aware those are some of the different things that we're doing within Kent Park. We also have 2 new areas on each river. We have the Peckman Creek Delta area, which is across from the Riverside Casino. That's 400 acres. That is a stream, the Buck Creek and Peckman Creek, before they enter the Iowa River. That is a really nice floodplain area that we're going to work to restore some wetlands on. The Cedar River Crossing Wildlife Area up by the Sutliff Bridge, same thing. We're going to restore a bunch of wetlands on the floodplain. Okay? Those things are very important for the health of our rivers and our aquatic communities and wildlife in general. Okay? And so restoring those areas, the one we bought down by Peckman Creek, the Iowa River, the ag community actually came to us. The farmers that own that said, we are tired of losing this fight. So they came to us and we helped him get out of that situation. He went around and was able to purchase more productive ag ground. So that's a win-win for everybody. And then the last thing I'll talk to you guys about real quick is if you ever have an opportunity, and we're not stopping today, Kate, are we, on the Clear Creek stream restoration? But if you ever have a chance, if you're riding down the Clear Creek trail between Tiffin, Ireland Avenue, and Half Moon, on the south side, we had to do a stream bank restoration on Clear Creek. So that was an area trees had fallen in, the stream was trying to move and take out our trail. So to save that, we went in and we did a stream bank restoration. No riprap, nothing unnatural. We used vegetation that was there, sticks that were there, logs that were there, and restabilized that bank. And it was very successful. I was very cautious of it. Dave Derrick, who is a biologist out of Mississippi, came up and helped us with this. And I was like, Dave, he's kind of a crazy guy to begin with. Are you sure this is going to work? He's like, yeah, this will work if we do it right. And it did. And I'm really impressed with it. So if you have a chance, stop out and take a look at that. That is what we really need to do, because turtles, amphibians need to be able to move in and out of those environments. There wasn't riprap there before, so we converted it back to what it naturally was. And hopefully that'll be successful. So any questions? Because I got to keep us on time. Promised. All right, if not, thanks for stopping out today. If you ever have any questions, feel free to give us a call or call Kate and she can get a hold of us. I think trash cans are right outside the door here.
You can leave your plates here.
Leave our Kate plates here.
So you just need to take yourself to the bus, pick up water on the way.
Amy says load them up. Right on time. You got to be out of the park in 5 minutes.
Coralville's magazine, Coralville Connection. And in the middle here, let's see if I can give you a page number, we have a great article on kind of what we're doing with stormwater on Coralville. It's on page 6 and 7. And it talks about our 5th Street projects, the Iowa River Landing, and the project that we're heading to now, the Coral Ridge Avenue project. So I'll tell you some background about Coral Ridge Avenue and kind of how it came to be. A few years ago, there was a design to take this 2-lane roadway to a 4-lane. And it was designed like any other road reconstruction project using what we call gray infrastructure. So typical storm drains, gutter lines, and then all that would empty into the closest creek, and then a pond that you find behind Costco. We call it the E-Wall recreation area. So we had it designed like that, and for some reason the project didn't go forward, probably due to funding at the time or something like that. But about 2 years ago, they decided to go forward with the project, and we had the opportunity to design it differently. So we did. So instead of using gray infrastructure, we used green infrastructure, bioretention cells and swales. We removed a lot of the long longitudinal pipe that would go on the side of the road and traditionally carry stormwater to the closest creek.
When you get up here, fall asleep.
So we continued moving ahead with the road reconstruction project using green infrastructure. This is where the WERB grant came in, and we were able to secure about $263,000 to help with the green elements of this project. And part of that was, this bus tour, the infrastructure itself, and then also creating a cost feasibility study. So since we had both designs, we were able to really look at those designs, the costs associated with it, and see, okay, so how much more does green infrastructure really cost? So we know there's increased benefits with green infrastructure. You have increased aesthetics, the flowers and the bioretention cells, cleaner water, but how much does that actually cost you dollar per dollar? So in that packet, you'll find cost feasibility study that HR Green put together. And it talks about a few different projects. The front picture is a rendering of what we expect Coral Ridge Avenue bioretention cells to look like in a few years. When you go there today, they do not look like this. So they were planted late last fall, and the plants are about 2 inches tall. So they haven't bloomed out, they haven't grown, but they will. So here's a rendering of what we expect them to look like. And going through the costs of both designs, we found that there's actually a 10% savings going with green infrastructure versus gray. And as you read through this study, there are other projects that have even a bigger cost savings associated with them. So there's one in a residential neighborhood, and they call it the Hillsdale project, that was looking at a 39% cost savings. So not only are you getting those additional aesthetic benefits, water quality benefits, but you're also saving money. But green infrastructure is like anything else. If you design it correctly, if you know how to build it, you can save money doing it. I'm sure if you design it to include those same lateral pipes that would have been in conventional designs, you're not going to save money. But one of the things that you get to do when you're looking at a green infrastructure project is remove those hard pipes. So there's nothing more expensive than concrete pipes or storm inlets. So by removing those and putting them into overland swales like the bioretention swales you'll see, you save big money on infrastructure costs, and that's essentially how you save money on project costs. Another handout that you have in your packet is the Urban Conservation BMP Research Project. And Coralville is a partner in this project. It is a project that is run by the Iowa Department of Ag and Land Stewardship by their urban conservationists. And they received money from the state in 2 different grant awards to do testing on these urban conservation practices. So we know they're improving water quality, but by how much? When we look at agricultural practices, we can put a reduction with them. So, and I don't specifically know offhand what the reduction is, but if we're putting in a sediment basin in an agricultural field, we can say we're getting X number percent reduction in total soil loss. Or a grass waterway, we're getting X number percent reduction. In the urban landscape, it's not developed yet. So when we put in a bioretention cell and bacteria flows into that cell from the roadway, how much is that bioretention cell reducing that bacteria flow? So this grant has helped us to monitor some of those practices. If you look at the back, it shows the map where these practices are located. And Coral Ridge Avenue is one of those practices we've been monitoring. We've also been monitoring bioretention cells at the Kirkwood Regional Facility. And we have an interesting situation there. We have 2 bioretention cells that are exactly the same. They take the exact same amount of water, but one is planted into turf grass and one is planted into native grasses. And so we're monitoring them both to see if there is any change based on vegetation type. There's a lot of benefits to native plants, but sometimes developers don't want that look. And they'll say, you know, I want this area to look like a golf course. And I believe that vegetation shouldn't be a deal breaker on these systems. So if we're seeing the results of our pollutant reductions to be similar between native plants and turf, and somebody really wants to put in turf because that's the look they want, I don't want to lose that bioretention cell or the fact that we said, you know, no, you have to put in native plants. So we're trying some outside of the box thinking so that, you know, there's different ways that these can look. I love a prairie, but not everybody likes that look. So I think that Kirkwood building's gonna be very interesting. So we've been monitoring our mayor's permeable paving driveway, and I tell you what, we've been having a lot of trouble monitoring it. So in this permeable paving driveway, there is a tile in the middle of the rock chamber. And John, do you know how far that tile is up from the bottom?
Well, 22 inches, 26 inches.
Okay, so it's about 26 inches up from the bottom of the rock chamber in the driveway. We've been trying to get water coming out of that outflow pipe for about a year and a half. And no matter what size rain event, we haven't been able to catch it because the water is infiltrating. And it really kind of gives me pause and makes me, when you're in stormwater, you think you know something and then you find out you don't. Because it's such an evolving field, and you know, you always think you know what Mother Nature is doing, and then she has other ideas. But when putting in this practice, the NRCS came up and we took soil samples to see what the subsoil was, to see if we had any infiltration capabilities. And the soil scientists with the NRCS took big borings, and they were like, this is the worst soil we've ever seen in our life. It's awful. You're not going to get any infiltration. It's the hardest pan clay. This is terrible. And they said, you know, I don't even know if I would do this. I don't know if I would put in this practice because it just might not even do anything. So we went forward with it anyway because I was like, my mayor wants to put in a permeable paving driveway. We're going to do it. You know, we're going to make this happen. So we put it in and we started monitoring it, seeing what was going on. The water is infiltrating through. No matter what size rain event we get, if we get a 3-inch rain event, it's infiltrating through. I don't know how that is working because based on the soils that are present there, it shouldn't be happening. I don't know if we're hitting a sand seam in there somewhere. Coralville's kind of famous for having these buried sand seams that allow more infiltration, but it's working. So it's been hard to get a sample out of that pipe because it's infiltrating. So it's a really great problem to have. Fortunately, this spring we were able to get a rain event that produced water out the tile. John didn't get very much, but he got enough to be able to do some basic testing. So we just got the results yesterday, and it's just showing really, really clean water coming out of that pipe. Brad talked a little bit about bacteria and that 235 limit that we kind of look for. It looked like bacteria coming out of this was, I think, maybe around 60, which is extremely low. So it looks like it's working really well. When we go up to Coral Ridge Avenue, we'll be able to show you some of the monitoring devices. We have monitoring devices in all the storm inlets that are coming in. And Ray will talk a little bit more about that there. Ray, can you raise your hand? Okay, so Ray has been doing all the groundwork for monitoring on this project, and she knows it inside and out. But one of the things as a city that we've been really interested in is flow rates. So we can quantify how much water is coming into these cells, and then we can quantify how much is leaving. And you have a little handout that kind of shows that graph. But what we're looking, so 100% of the water that's coming off the roadway is getting treated in these bioretention cells and swales. And then is it 21%? Is 20 to 21% of the water is disappearing. So that's that is groundwater recharge. So 100% of it's getting cleaned, but 20% of it is just going away. And that's, you know, that's including the big rain events. So it's pretty awesome. So I think having that data over long term will show a lot, because I think we're getting a lot more flood control benefits out of these water quality practices than we think we are. So if we can contribute some of these, some flood control within these water quality practices, that is something that is really favorable to urban conservation and developers, because we're talking about developable ground. And when you have to put in a detention basin, you lose a lot. Maybe that doesn't have to happen. Maybe we can account for some of those detention benefits in our water quality practices. So that's something I think that we plan to learn long-term with this project. We also have what we call first flush devices on the inlets that are monitoring the water quality of the stormwater that's coming off the road before it goes in the bioretention cell. We're going to let off.
Let off at Walgreens.
So we'll be able to see what those parameters and pollutants are looking like that are coming right off the roadway, and then we'll also be able to grab them at that end of the pipe, like we talked about with John's, on what's leaving. So we'll be able to see reduction for reduction. An interesting thing about this roadway also is that it's its own watershed. So there isn't water coming in from anywhere else, and none of this water is leaving. So it's just a great experiment, because we don't have any influences coming from other places. Does anybody have any questions right now? Okay. When we get off here, we're going to walk down the project a little bit, and Art and Ray are going to talk more specifically about their monitoring and what's been going on. And then we'll finish walking up north, and the bus will pick us up on the north side. Let's take a look at the time here. In about 45 minutes.
So as Art said, hi, my name is Ray Tokuhisa. I'm a master's in civil engineering, and I hope to defend in July, so fingers crossed for me. As Art said, most of the flow data that is included on your handout is actually for the cells that are a little further north. These two cells we are monitoring for the electrical conductivity and the levels in the wells, and we're doing pretty well. So each of the inlets up top are monitored for flow, and we're seeing on our large events about a 20% reduction in the volume in versus the volume out. Everything is being treated. We haven't had an event yet that's used the overflow structures. The overflow structures are these ugly concrete boxes up there. You'll see them. The water level hasn't gotten high enough, which means that every drop of rain that falls into these cells or flows into these cells is being filtered by the sediments that are present. And as the vegetation grows and develops, hopefully that'll increase the microbial communities that exist in these cells, and so we'll get more pollutant removal as well. So if we're at a different part of my academic career, maybe I would stick around for 5 years and do a PhD and tell you, oh, when we started this cell, this is how well we were doing or not well we were doing, and by the end, look at how this vegetation changed, and we just don't have that picture yet, but my job is helping us get to the point where we can make those kinds of assertions in the future. And so I'm looking at this handout because I spent all night on it, and I hope you like it. So my most impressive hydrograph that I've ever made is this one on the bottom, and that's looking at an event that happened right over graduation, or right before graduation weekend. We had a lot of rain come in, and like I said, the 20% was recharged into the aquifer. And anything smaller than that, for smaller rain events, sometimes you don't even see anything come out the outfall, which is why I included that little hump at the end underneath the text that says volume in and volume out. There's a little hump that came in, and the outfall isn't registering anything, which means that some of those smaller events are just being completely absorbed by the system. So, is everybody doing all right? Yeah. Grand, did we learn something today? Raise your hand if you learned something today. If you didn't raise your hand, maybe you should have cracked a textbook. All right.
Yeah, just to point out what you might be seeing here. These are wells. We have a
a device down here that measures the water level and also the electrical conductivity in here. And then these little boxes are data recorders, okay? So as we move up there, we've got other devices too. We have flow meters. We don't have any flow meters here because there's a really funky setup here that defeats flow meter sampling. One other thing you didn't mention with the first flush device.
Oh, absolutely. So our first flush is anytime that it looks like there's going to be rain, we'll run out, and it's a little canister. There's a picture of it on the front of the handout, and it works exactly like a carburetor in the sense that water goes in and there's a little float in the canister, and as the water fills up the container, then the float blocks it off, and so we have the first flush and only the first flush that's coming into the cell. And then for larger events where it looks like I have enough time to get from my home in Iowa City to here, we'll collect grab samples to do a full suite of testing. So the first flush samples, there's only enough water to really look at the nitrates and the total, so like chlorides. And then on the grab samples that we do where we can collect more water, we're looking at nitrogen, phosphorus, total hydrocarbons, pH, what am I missing? Everything, anything and everything. So we have both of those setups for looking at water quality.
Now,
yeah.
I have one question. I'm confused about electrical conductivity. Why that's important, why you measure it.
Well, because it's easy to measure. It's easy and consistent, and what we're hoping is, what we're ultimately after here is chloride, because we want to know if there's salt or de-icer on the road. Does this system do anything to process that?
What's also interesting for salts is that they're conservative. And so if you want to know how pollutants, if nothing else was happening to them, how they move through the system, salt is a really good way to see where those things are going, because there's no photolytic or like sunlight decay, there's no microbial decay, and so you can really watch a pollutant go straight through the system or wherever else it's going.
So with electrical conductivity, one salts in a water can increase the electrical conductivity. So can a whole bunch of other stuff. And so we're actually analyzing, we have a little portable meter, and then we also send stuff to the University of Hygienic Laboratory that actually tells us chloride. And so we're creating a calibration curve over time relating electrical conductivity to chloride. That's the idea. Try to get at that indirectly. Yeah. Now, it won't be perfect, but we're hoping that it'll actually be something that we can have a continuous record of that relates to chloride. So far, it looks pretty reasonable. I mean, when we have higher chloride content, our electrical conductivity is around.
Now, Aaron, I've got a question for you. So this obviously is going to come up with the hydrant plants and the cell, but what about exterior to this? Is this a turf grass mix, or what do you have outside of that?
Most of these have a real specific mix in the practice themselves. Then they have a native grass and wildflower mix and a buffer around that. Okay. And then we've got a 6-foot wide turf grass buffer along all the trails and roads, so we don't get stuff hanging into the trails.
Just sort of an information thing. If any of you have been driving down here, if you haven't, this was like bare ground in March. Okay, so it'll look a lot better as time goes along here.
And they're still under progress, so there's still some planning in a few areas going on. Some of this is still a temporary mix.
Right, I see some annual stuff in there. Cover crop.
Some of it will get replaced for things come up.
So should we walk up? Okay, any questions?
I just wanted to point out some of the technical staff too, in case anyone has any specific questions. Aaron, if you can raise your hand. Aaron Gwenup with HR Green was the mastermind on this project. Jeff Koenig.
Yeah, one of the other HR Green.
Jeff, raise your hand, will you? Jeff was the fixer. He was also the site psychiatrist. It's very hard to get a lot of heavy equipment operators working on a project like this, but saying, oh, be very careful in this area. Oh, you can't put dirt in there. You can't drive your equipment in there. So Jeff helped coordinate all of that and keep that on track.
Good job on the riprap here, Jeff.
This isn't part of the stormwater project, but we do have a pedestrian and bike tunnel that is almost complete. You're welcome to walk through and take a look. It's really cool in there. It's kind of nice if you want to step out of the sun for a minute, but you're welcome to go in there. And then we'll also continue walking up and taking a look and talking some more.
But it really mimics a DOT road. And we had to go by DOT standards when building this. and we said to the roadway engineers, we're going to take the water from the road and we're going to put it in the middle of the road and infiltrate it. And they thought it was the worst idea they've ever heard. Because as a transportation engineer, you move water away from the road as quickly as possible, get it out of here. So the fact that we were going to put it in the middle of the road on purpose seemed like just nuts. So we talked with them about how we were going to design it. There's going to be a rock chamber, there's going to be a tile. All of this structure is going to be far below the rock chamber and tile in the roadway. We have big overflows, we do not see flooding happening, and we talked them into it. But as far as I know, this is the first roadway, 4-lane roadway, that has a bioretention cell within the middle median in Iowa. And we do have multiple monitoring wells so that we will be able to see what's going on within that system. But we really hope that this will forward, looking at stormwater runoff in a different way within roadway projects. So far, we haven't seen any complications. We've had some big rains. This is an online system, which means there's no bypass. So this system is designed for the 1.25-inch rainfall event. So that's the pollutant load, the first flush, all the contaminants that come off. It's also designed to infiltrate the 2.4-inch rainfall event, which is the rainfall event which really messes up our creeks downstream, causes a lot of erosion. But if we get a 7-inch rainfall event, it's coming in anyway, all of it. So we have to make sure that it can lay down and be protected during those extreme rain events, which has been very challenging, especially during construction. Because like I said, you can't stop it. It's coming in, no matter if you're done building it or not. So it was challenging, but it worked out. And I think overall it's been functioning very well. Right now, it's at the most vulnerable it will ever be because there's no plants. So there's no bio to help slow down that water, so it's moving in pretty quick. So in some of the cells up here, you might see a little bit of erosion moving through, but that's a natural part of everything going to equilibrium and the sand and the soil mix landing where it's going to be. It's the exact opposite of a pipe system. So when you install a storm pipe and a storm drain, the first day you install it, that's the strongest day of its life, and then it goes downhill. Bioretention cells are the opposite. They are at the weakest day of their life the first day you install, and then they continue to get stronger and stronger over time. So that's what we look forward to seeing and being able to see in our monitoring. So we're looking at a 20% volume reduction right now from these cells. When the plants get big and we're a few years down the road, will we get more? We're not sure. So we're interested to see how that plays out over time. So we'll walk up this way and show you some more. You'll see some areas where there's weirs in between the cells. So the sand mix will always likes to go to level. So we built them at a slope, and we call them a bioswale since there's slope on them. As water comes down, it's naturally starting to level that out, and that's what you'll see. But that is, that's something that we anticipated happening. We'll continue to put more plants in, and it's much easier to work with the forces than try to fight the big flows that come in. So you might see some of those small erosion, but I think in the magnitude, I think it's doing what it should. So, yep.
With regard to the vegetation influence, research we've done at Eastside Recycling in Iowa City and the bioswales there, they've been in 5 years. And with them, when you start out, if you do a run-in event, a run-in a known volume, we're starting out with about 20% infiltration. With the vegetation in them now, after 5 years, they get about 70% infiltration. So it'll, I think, make a big difference.
So that could be also those huge detention reductions that we're hoping to see, those big volumes, because it's about water quality and improving water quality, but we also need to be knocking off those peat flows that are destroying our streams and causing flooding. Since 2008, flooding's been a huge thing. You get a lot of money if you can, say you're reducing flooding. Well, I think that we can do both. I think we can have practices that improve water quality and reduce flooding.
Amy, has it been a struggle convincing the Iowa DNR to
No.
go along with? They're buying it.
Yeah, so the Iowa DNR has been a huge partner. We recently received $2.7 million in sponsored project money for green infrastructure in Coralville, which is huge. I think it's the biggest amount that's been allocated in Iowa yet. And I mean, Coralville has 20,000 people. So to be able to get money like that in a town this size is just incredible. So we also, a big part of working with the DNR has been the Iowa Stormwater Management Manual and getting design specifications for all the engineers. So we're designing things correctly, they're working, there's no failures. There's nothing worse than a failed green infrastructure project because people think, hey, I told you that wasn't gonna work. So, you know, it's really important to us to protect against design flaws and make sure that construction it has quality control practices and that things are getting installed the way that they're supposed to. And the Iowa Stormwater Management Manual has really pushed design of these green infrastructure projects along.
About this project that is, I think, nice and interesting it's a divided highway. It's a DOT road. Okay, it's smaller than an interstate, but it's a lot like an interstate. And it's a lot like a lot of other divided highways. And so, if the practices here work, it's applicable to a huge road system in this state. And we've got a proposal into the DOT to continue the monitoring here to really show them whether this thing works or not, because they're not going to go with it unless they know. And here's an opportunity to find out really on the cheap, because the system's built and the monitoring system's in. And it could really turn things around, because really our streams are, there's a huge impact on our streams from runoff of roads across the state. Every bridge, the DOT spends so much money trying to keep bridges in place, trying to re-riprap them, stabilize them, and it's where these ditches come into those streams. And if we can slow that water down and infiltrate a lot of that water with systems like this, it's money in the bank down the road.
And just to partner on with what Art was saying, Patty Kale-Finnegan's with the Iowa DNR, and she said they are also working on a toolbox for stream restoration. So stay tuned for that. All right, should we move on?
So yeah, there's the little steps that Amy was talking about. You can kind of see the sands accumulating behind the upper one there, it's flattening it out. The next one up there, where the riprap comes in from the side, those are inlets from basically inlets along the road to catch the runoff. That's where the water comes in. That's all these little CROs. Those are our inlets. That's where we measure how much water comes in, and we measure the quality of the water coming in. We measure the quality of the water in the wells, which is before it infiltrates into the gravels. And then we can measure the quality of the water coming out the bottom off the whole project. And the volume.
So this was built at a swale. It is leveling itself out. We'll continue to plant on top of it and allow it to kind of morph into what it wants to be. The best thing that you can do, and when you look at the top, you notice we have quite a bit of original grade here. It's easier to build a series of cells with drop structures than one swale, because when you build those drop structures, it slows the water down. And especially during construction, the hardest thing to deal with is the velocity. So by building individual cells that drop to each other and feed farther down, it seems to be an easier way to design and build these structures. And we have quite a parkway here, but you don't need to have this much room to install something like this. If you've ever driven on 5th Street in Coralville, we have stormwater planters that have the same function, and they're within a 10-foot right of way. So you can really change the width on these and still have them function. You can always build them deeper, but not so far across. So it's all kind of about capacity. So this was the way this fit into the system. We also wanted it to be an amenity to the walking trail. And I hope to have you back here in a few years and we have flowers. But you know, it takes some time, and like anything, there's maintenance. Even if it was a pipe situation, you're looking at vacuuming twice a year, you know, removing leaves, removing things that obstruct it. So our maintenance on this is just a little bit different. We throw in plugs while we can. The area around here is prairie, so it needs to be kept short for a few years to give that time to come up. On the other side of the trail, we have turf, and that turf was preferable to the adjacent property owners. So we were able to kind of make concessions, I guess, for them, so that they could be proud of what was adjacent to their building, and we could be proud of what was adjacent to our infrastructure. Anybody else have any questions right now? Okay, we can continue walking up, and we'll meet the bus on the north side.
And now I'm like, I
What did we learn today, Amy?
I think we learned that the urban world and the agricultural world can work together to solve some of our current water quality issues. And I think it really all comes down to the soil. So protecting your soil out there, utilizing your soil in town, and using it to filter out pollutants.